Hi students, this is a video to help you walk through the POGIL activity, Fundamentals of Experimental Design. This activity was designed to be done in a group, but if you're watching this video, you probably don't have a group. Perhaps you're quarantining at home or you're absent. So what you're going to do is we will pause and you will have the chance to respond to some of the questions. After you respond, then you'll be able to go forward and I'll share with you some of my insights. Just because you don't answer the same way that I do doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means that maybe I thought about it in a different way. So it's important that you listen to the explanations that I give and make up your mind yourself if maybe you misunderstood something or if you just could look at it in a different way. Okay, let's get started. Working in the science lab can be a lot of fun. Mixing random chemicals and burning stuff just to see what can happen can be entertaining, but it possibly dangerous, but it doesn't lead to anything helpful to the scientific community. In order to be helpful in the community, a researcher's work in the lab must be systematic. A researcher usually asks a question and then designs an experiment to investigate that question. In this activity, you will identify different types of variables that will help you design a controlled experiment. So think about, what is the objective of this lab? Go ahead and enter your answer now. Did you look at the very last line of the why? Our activity, or our objective, is to identify different types of variables so that we'll know how to design a controlled experiment. Let's look at Model 1. Study the model and answer the following questions. Number 1, briefly describe the reaction illustrated in Model 1 in one or more complete sentences. By reaction, they are saying what is going on. So the before, mix, and after. Describe the changes you see. Focus on the middle picture. This is the what's happening picture. And just real quickly, if you're not familiar with Alka-Seltzer, it's a medicine that you put into water usually. Here they're putting it in vinegar. And it effervesces, and then you drink it to cure like a stomach ache or a headache. So go ahead and answer number 1. Good. What I see happening in the experiment is Alka-Seltzer is added to vinegar. The tablet bubbles or produces gas. And I see that the temperature changes from 23.5 degrees to 22.6 degrees. So the temperature decreased. Question number 2. Did the room pressure change as the reaction occurred? And if yes, was there an increase or a decrease? Pause and answer this question. Did you say the room pressure stayed the same? So 84 kPa all the way across. That probably means that the pressure of the room is not affected by what's going on in the beaker. Let's scroll down to read number 3 to you. What 2 pieces of evidence observed during the mix phase of the reaction suggest that a chemical change is taking place? Pause and answer this question. Nice. The way I answered this question, looking at the mix beaker, I said that I can see a gas is being produced, and gas is evidence of a chemical change. The other thing that I saw that tells me a chemical change occurred is my temperature of the system changed from 23.5 degrees to 22.6 degrees. That means that energy was absorbed. Let's go to the next model. This is a representation of data from the experiment we just looked at. Answer the following questions looking at Model 2. Which trial in Model 2 data corresponds to the reaction illustrated in Model 1? Did you say trial 1? Correct, because one tablet was added and we had a decrease in temperature to 22.6 degrees. Consider the 5 trials that produce the data in Model 2. What variable was purposefully changed in the experiment? And what variable changed as a result of the changing variable listed in Part A? Answer the question. Good. The variable that was changed on purpose or changed by the investigator was the number of tablets. We can see that in trial 1, they just added 1 and then they increased by 1 every single time. The result of adding more tablets to each beaker was that the final temperature became colder and colder with every tablet they added. Let's scroll down and look at the next question. What variables shown in method 2 remain constant at all trials? Good. If we look at the column for the volume of vinegar, the room pressure, and the initial temperature of the vinegar, those all were constant in every single trial. They remain the same. So we said they were held constant. This is important to make sure that whatever change we see in the experiment was caused by the thing we changed and not by some other variable that might have changed in the reaction. Let's look at another set of data. In Model 3, we're looking at the boiling points of alcohol. Describe the similarities and differences in the 5 alcohols used in Model 3. I'll give you a second to do that. If you're not sure, look for patterns. The obvious thing is that we have different types of alcohols. Some students pointed out that all of the alcohols ended in the name anol. But the formula gives us another comparison. What's the same? Right. We have carbon and hydrogen and oxygen making up all of them. We can see we have groups of CH3s and CH2s. But notice that the number of carbons in each one increases. Column 3 shows us this. Another similarity is even though the carbons and hydrogen groupings on the left increase, the number of OHs stays the same. Number 9, consider the experiment that produced the data in Model 3. What variable was purposefully changed and what variable changed as a result of the changing variable in Part A? Take a second to answer that question. Good. Did you say that the number of carbons is what's purposefully changed? Yeah, that was kind of tricky because we had different alcohols, the formula changed, and the number of carbons changed. The reason that the experimenter or scientist was changing the type of alcohol was because they wanted to increase the number of carbons. In Part B, we can see that as the number of carbons increases, the only other change is the boiling point. How could we describe the change or the relationship? As the number of carbons increases on an alcohol, the boiling point of the alcohol rises. This section of text is important. This is giving you the definition of 3 very important terms. So if you're taking notes, you should write this down. If you have a copy of the activity with you, then you should probably underline or highlight these definitions. When designing an experiment, you need to consider 3 types of variables. The independent variable is changed by the experimenter by design. You should underline that. This variable is sometimes called the manipulated variable. The dependent variable is what is changed or what changes as a result of the independent variable changing. This variable is sometimes called the responding variable. You should underline the definition for dependent variable. The third category involves controlled variables. These variables that you think might change the outcome of the experiment. But since you're not studying them, you need to keep them constant in each trial. You should underline that as well. Let's practice. Identify the independent, dependent, and controlled variables for the experiments that were produced in the data in Model 1 and 2. So you'll want to scroll back up and look at Model 2 to fill in the table, and Model 3 to fill in the table. So pause the video and record your results. How did you do? Good. We said that the number of Alka-Seltzer tablets was what the experimenter manipulated, so this is our independent variable. Our dependent variable is the final temperature because we can see that the temperature decreased as a result of increasing the number of tablets. Volume of vinegar, room pressure, and initial temperature are all constants. In the next experiment, Model 3, the independent variable is the number of carbons. The dependent variable is the boiling point, and we held the volume of alcohol and the room pressure constant. A well-written research question states the independent and dependent variable for an experiment. For example, a student investigated the effect of dicer, or magnesium chloride, on vegetation on the sides of highways. Her research question was, what is the effect of magnesium chloride on the solution concentration of the growth of ryegrass? Write a research question using the format suggested in the Read This box. So you're going to write a question. What question was the researcher trying to answer for Alka-Seltzer and vinegar and the boiling points of alcohols? So take a minute to do that right now. What did you come up with? My question would likely be, that I'm trying to answer here on this one is, how does increasing the number of tablets affect the final temperature of the reaction? For Model 3, my question might have been, how does the number of carbons in an alcohol affect the boiling point? Let's go to the final questions. A student wonders, will changing the volume of alcohol in the boiling point experiment change the boiling point of the liquid? Identify the variables that should be considered in this experiment. So what would the independent variable be? What would the dependent variable be? And then what would be controlled? So will changing the volume of alcohol change the boiling point of the liquid? So let's go back up here and see what the variables were. They're talking about changing the volume. Okay, so if they're changing the volume, this becomes the independent variable. The independent variable on the number of carbons needs to be held constant. So perhaps the experiment would be they're just going to look at methanol, and then they'll look at different volumes of methanol. So now the number of carbons would become a constant. Since we're looking at how it affects the boiling point would be the dependent variable. And guess what? Room pressure is still a constant. Think about this. Many experiments are designed to investigate the reaction of Mentos with Diet Coke, and they've been documented on YouTube. Design and write an experiment that uses the knowledge gained in this activity to investigate this reaction. Include a research question, the independent, dependent, and controlled variables, and a simple procedure for how you would do it. If you're not sure about the Mentos and Coke, go Google it, watch a few of them, and then decide how you would design the experiment. You'll have a chance to type this in, and I'm going to either talk to you about it in class, or I'll respond by email to see how it went. Thanks for watching.